It's time for Pure
Performance. Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Pure Performance. I'm Brian Wilson, and on the line with me is Andy Grabner. I was going to say on the phone, Andy. I guess technically it's still kind of phone-ish, but not really. How are you doing today, Andy?
I'm good. Thanks. Still sitting in Boston here, and I guess you don't want me to talk about the weather because I tried this in our first attempt to record, and you said nobody's interested in talking about the weather, so we skipped that part.
Let's talk about government instead. People love talking about weather, government, and religion, right? So let's do that.
Exactly. Open up a can of worms.
Yes.
No, seriously. So today, the episode today was triggered by an amazing amount of positive feedback that we have all received at Perform. When I think he picked a little bit of a Swiss, Spanish, English accent on stage. So our own Simon, he went on stage at Perform at our conference end of January in Vegas, and he put a lot of energy. I think he's just a very energetic person. And I also witnessed this later on at the end of the show at the dance floor, which was fantastic. But on stage, Simon was the one who presented visual replay. And visual replay was something that I believe we can all agree, for those that have seen it on the live stream or that read about it on the blogs, in the news announcements. It's a very fantastic, it's an amazing, cool new feature set that we're bringing in, opening up a lot of new use cases. Now, what are these use cases? And to discuss this, we actually brought Simon in, and now I actually want to hear this Spanish, Swiss, German, English accent. So, Simon, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm there. Hi, Andy. Hi, Brian. Actually, I just wanted to say I would not want to add too much Spanish or Swiss German accent today, so I'll try to do it properly. But yeah, great to be here with you guys.
So Simon, and Andy, I guess I don't remember. On the dance floor, was that when I was doing my special brand of dancing, or did Simon and I not cross paths? I can't recall.
I'm not sure if you've been on the dance floor at the same time, but I remember we've danced. We had fun on the dance floor at the last.
I just don't know. I'd be. Well, I guess now that I don't have all the scotch in me, I'd be a little bit embarrassed if Simon saw me dancing. But it's out there for it to be. I just kind of let loose, Simon. I don't have any proper dancing skills.
Hey, Simon, can you give us a little background about yourself, who you are, kind of what your role is within Dynatrace, and then let's dig into the topic?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Simon. I'm, kind of this type of guy that you would probably call a serial entrepreneur. I had quite some companies that I funded and was building up. The last one was actually a session replay company, and then we get in touch with Dynatrace, which ultimately led to us being bought by Dynatrace, and that brought me now into this new role that I have within Dynatrace, so being the responsible for the Barcelona lab and building this up and bringing this technology to Dynatrace, and also extending it then into user experience analytics and trying to push this entire user experience topic forward within the company and towards the customers.
That's pretty cool. So now you said a serial entrepreneur, and the company you founded that we acquired was called Quamram. And can you fill us in? I know visual replay is something, if you just say the name visual replay, a lot of people have maybe different things in mind. So can you tell us what are the main use cases that you guys identified to actually start a startup back in the days?
Well, our original use cases, when we started it, was actually mostly to be able to prove what is going on. So when we got into the market, we had a lot of requirements from customers that wanted us to prove what their customers are doing in case of e-commerce, in case of e-banking applications, and these alikes. But what then happened, as soon as we started to develop this technology, and as soon as they've seen about how great the experience is, how movie-like it is, what you can actually see, and how much you can discover by literally looking over the shoulders of people, we got more and more into the area of user experience. So what we do now, and what is the ultimate use case if we want for session replay, is for us it's kind of the utmost level of drill down that you can think of. So there is so much available in the market. There are so many analytics tools that tell you what customer segments are not successful or do not reach their goals. There are tools, Dynatrace, that tells you if there are an error occurs, the performance is bad. There are customer complaints and all these kind of things, and you don't really understand what's going on. And in all that cases, Session Replay will just give you much more context because you can just see what is going on. And this is why Session Replay is really a successful addition to so many other products, because you have the final view about what a customer was doing, and you perfectly understand what has been going on.
Mm-hmm. And I think if people want to actually see Visual Replay for themselves, I believe on the website, if you go to dynatrace.com and search for Visual Replay, there's a page, also a video, because you keep telling about this video. It's like you can actually replay visually what a user, an individual user, really did on your website, including, and correct me if I'm wrong, but including moving the mouse around, swiping, scrolling, pulling drop boxes down, doing things and interacting with the website. And I remember when you were on stage, and maybe you have to remind me now of the name of the user that you were actually analyzing. It was a lady. What was the name again?
Ashley McCall.
Ashley, exactly. So you basically showed us Ashley, and she was trying to purchase something on an e-commerce site. And she tried multiple times to fill out these forms, but when dropping down a box or something, I think there was like an endless progress bar coming up, or something failed. And obviously with all the other tools that you mentioned earlier, even with Dynatrace itself, with our Dynatrace RAM, we would basically tell you which clicks Ashley would have done, but we would not be able to visually tell you what her experience was. Like, there was this particular, wait symbol, or this wait progress bar, or a visual error box on the screen that kept her from actually continuing her conversation or her conversion journey. And I think this was really fantastic. Now, when we talk about Visual Replay, and I think we had this discussion before we started, you actually see which looks like a real movie, right? Now, can you go a little bit deeper before we explain other use cases? Can you go a little bit deeper technically? What are you actually capturing? Are you actually capturing video screens and frames on the user's device, or how does this work?
No, we don't capture actual videos. That's also why I mostly talk about movie-like experience, because it just really looks like a movie. So the quality is like watching a movie, but it is not. Technically spoken, if you're looking at a browser application, then everything that you visually see has its internal representation in the browser that we call the DOM, the Document Object Model. And every time something changes visually on the screen, this also has its internal, there is a change also in this Document Object Model. And what we do is we are kind of monitoring this Document Object Model. And every time that a change happens, we see that. We capture the difference in between the former state and the current state, and this difference is what we actually store and save. And then in Replay, we just do it the other way around. So we take the initial state and we reapply all these changes, and with that, we are able to recreate this entire visual experience the exact same way that the user has seen it. But it's still, of course, textual data, so we are not, filling storage with movie files.
And the other question that somebody asked me once, and I know the answer to this, but I just wanted to put this out there because I think other people might have the same question, is somebody asked, well, if somebody is filling out a form and they click submit, let's say, is the replay submitting that data of theirs again to the system? And, my understanding is absolutely not. We're just recreating what it would look like. But I guess their concern was, is it actually, if the replay is going to log somebody in, is it actually going to log them into their account, like on the replay session?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So
right.
we're kind of a sandbox. It's exactly as you say. We're just recreating the visual experience. It's not a simulation, it's a reproduction, which is also a differentiator towards other tools that actually do, as you say, they try to reapply the events to make the application behave the same way and hope that this will recreate the kind of same experience, but typically it does not. But that's not what we do. It's really sandboxed. It's just a reproduction of what the user has seen without, let's say, an actual interaction with the original backend.
Right, and another thing that this makes me think of, when you guys were describing some of this earlier, and I think this applies to the use cases we're going to go through, so I wanted to put this in people's minds first, is with the idea of a replay. When you think about when there's a code problem on the back end, let's say there's an exception, right, Andy? What did the developers do, right? They look at the exception, they try to understand what caused it. Oftentimes then they'll pull up the code in their desktop or in their IDE, and they'll step through the code, trying to recreate it and see exactly how they're going, how it, the code executions and the step through that triggers the error, because they want to experience it, they want to see it. Now, if we take that idea and put it to front-end web development, the idea of stepping through the code you can only, if you have a JavaScript error, like we saw in the example that Simon showed at Perform, you see there is a JavaScript error, but you don't really know what that means. And it's not like you can step through code in quite the same way. There is some ability to step through code right in your browser tools, but you're not going to be seeing it. So to me, I'm thinking replay of a way to visually step through the code execution, so that when you do have that JavaScript error, you can step through the replay cases to the point where that occurs and actually see it visually and experience what that is. And I think it's just a different way of looking at it, and I'm really excited about it. I just can't say enough about it.
And I think, I've not developed that many web pages in my life, but I totally agree with you what you just said, because if I get a JavaScript error and I cannot reproduce it on my machine, it may just mean I didn't move the mouse over a certain DOM element that it was triggering some other JavaScript that is then changing the state. And with Visual Replay, you guys are capturing all of these interactions with the DOM that actually change the state of the DOM and potentially execute JavaScript code that leads to problems. And that's what I find so fascinating about this technology. And also the seamlessness and the easiness of enabling it. So Simon, can you quickly tell us, because I'm sure customers or anybody out there is wondering, how would you enable a technology like Visual Replay? How does this work? Do you have to install a browser plugin? Do you have to do some magic? How does it work?
Well, it depends a little bit on the case, but the easiest case to make it work is if you already have, for example, Dynatrace running, and you also already have a JavaScript agent that is happening to reside within your browser. Then ultimately it's just a tick in a configuration and it will work. What we do is injecting a JavaScript into the actual application, and this can of course happen by different means. It can happen with a tag manager like Telium, or it can happen if you have one agent installed. It will just happen through the one agent, so you don't have to do anything or change anything on your application. We just do that on the fly, and the only thing you have to do is basically, tick a configuration box and you're done.
That's pretty cool. So everything that you guys are capturing is really done through JavaScript that gets injected on that page. There's no native browser extension that anybody needs. It's just purely done through JavaScript, and that's very powerful.
Yes, exactly. The only situation where you would need a browser extension is if you actually want to record an application that you don't control. So say you want to record what your sales people do on Salesforce, or what your services people do on a ServiceNow application. So if it's really a SaaS application that you want to monitor with Session Replay, we can do even that. In that case, though, you would need a browser extension, because there's no way that you can actually get into the application as you don't control it yourself. But in all other cases, you definitely don't need anything in the browser. It all just happens magically.
That's cool. And I think, Brian, you also, before we started, you talked about that you are currently exploring this type of capability, what we call Dynatrace SaaS vendor RAM. So
actually, mine's a little different. We do, well, yeah, you can continue that thought, but my situation is a little bit different, where it's the agentless RUM. So for anyone familiar with Dynatrace, there is the ability to basically inject the JavaScript tag and the file somewhere locally, because the case in point is, let's say, Salesforce Commerce, which used to be Demandware. where you don't have access to put agents somewhere, but you can still inject JavaScript and tags into your page. That's actually the case I'm looking into, Andy, but I believe the case you're talking about with the, what did you call it again? The browser extension?
The SaaS vendor RAM. Yeah.
Right. That's more for like Salesforce proper, where you can't even touch anything. And you still have that browser extension that you can add in to collect the RUM data, the real user monitoring data, which I guess, Simon, what you're saying is you'll be able to piggyback on top of that and add the replay tag to that as well?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So that means, to sum it up, we have the ability to enable visual replay for any app where you either install a Dynatrace One agent on the server side, and that will automatically inject the RAM agent that we have, and then visual replay will be can be enabled. We can do it through Brian, the way you do it, which is called Agentless RAM, where you can inject a little JavaScript tag on, let's say, a page in case the vendor itself allows you to change these HTML templates. And the third option is if you have no control at all about the rendering, like Salesforce, Office 365, whatever else you use, then you can use our SaaS vendor RAM browser plugin to inject the JavaScript agent, and that monitor how your probably employees are using these services. So that's pretty cool. Now, Simon, you started off with talking about the use cases, and I think you said, kind of the user complaint resolution, figuring out what individual users are really doing. What else is out there? What else did you hear from people that have been exposed to Visual Replay? What are the other use cases that people like about it?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, user complaint resolution is definitely one of the biggest ones, where it's about single users. The other ones already have been mentioned by you, Andy, but also you, Brian. It is really providing context, because I would maybe want to go back a little bit to this debug idea about JavaScript. Typically, yes, you have means on, for example, debugging in case of errors, but you typically can't do that on live systems, because, you can do that in your browser while you're developing, but you're completely running blind if something happens out there in the wild. Some users are just getting into problems, and this is what we call the use case of providing context to anything that might happen. It could be a performance problem, it could be an error, but it can just, typically that's so hard to reproduce. So your developers just won't know what is going on. Why was this happening? How did it affect the user? What did he actually perceive? Where can I fix it? What do I have to fix? And all these kind of questions you can simply then answer with session replay. So this is the use case of providing context. And then there's one more, which is simply usability. So every time something pops up in your dashboard, so you see people are not converting, they're struggling, they're clicking like mad, because this is stuff that you can easily, let's say, find out analytically. You see these people, you see these segments, but you never know the why. And the why is what we add. The why is that's kind of the information that we can add to the picture to explain why people were not able to fill a form. We've seen so many things like, in sometimes that you have an accessories list and it simply drops over the actual submit button in a checkout process. So people were, given a lot of accessories to pick, but then finally could not conclude the actual transaction, or buttons that look like buttons but are not. And people are just clicking there like mad. Nothing happens, and then they're frustrated and drop off. All this information is super hard to get analytically, but it's so easy to just see. And so what we facilitate is just user experience improvement, which is another use case that we had very frequently, and helping to even, let's say, on a processual level, which is then rather, let's say, if you want the use case for the organization itself, to become more agile, because with that immediate feedback, you're just so much faster in fixing issues. You're so much faster in improving your application. You're so much faster on, for example, in an A/B test and getting feedback about which really work. And with that, it's way easier to get into iterative and agile processes and making your application much better in a much shorter cycle.
Cool. Another topic that I remember from discussions at Perform was compliance. And I'm not an expert in compliance, but I heard a lot of companies out there love a technology like visual replay for compliance reasons. So actually having the ability to kind of prove what individual users have done. Is this also, did I hear this correctly?
Yes, certainly. So if we're also looking, this is then heavily industry dependent, if you want. If we're looking, for example, at financial industry or other heavily regulated industries, there's so much going on now, also as a consequence, for example, of the financial crisis, that regulations have been tightening, and you have to prove that you actually did give best advice. You have to prove that a customer, when he purchases something or he does a trade, that you have given the right conditions, that everything was visible, that you have shown the full price. And now we get into the situation that to prove that, in the ages of Internet 1.0, this was really easy because it was just page-based. But now with single-page applications, getting data from very different systems, putting it all together, the only point where you actually see what has been going on truly and what the user has seen and what he was doing and whether he has confirmed the checkbox that he's supposed to check is on the client itself. And that's why it becomes more and more important to everything that's related to compliance to push it towards the actual end user experience and record this as ultimate proof what has been going on to show in case of litigation or towards the regulators. So this is definitely a trend that we are also seeing that comes kind of in parallel to all these other use cases.
In talking about compliance, so that also brings up the I was going to say 80-pound gorilla in the room, but it's 80-ton. The elephant in the room, right? Which is privacy, right? So obviously on the one side, you have compliance where you want to be able to prove the user did specific things, that certain specific things were shown on the screen. But there's another big question that everyone has about these technologies, which is the privacy. Am I capturing passwords? Are we seeing sensitive information about the users? There was just recently an article in Wired where they, just this week I read it, it was about replay sessions storing passwords. I think it was AutoTrack was the product, and they were mistakenly capturing passwords, and they weren't exposing them per se, but they were storing them within their data sets on their servers somewhere, right? So how does this tackle privacy, and how do we stop the fear of people thinking, oh my gosh, this company's capturing and storing all this data about me and it's all private and anybody can see it?
Well, we don't. That's our hidden business case to actually sell that stuff to the NSA.
We sell it to Facebook, who sells it to the NSA, right?
Exactly. Well, seriously, just let me answer this by twofold. First thing is about privacy is, of course, a high concern, and there's no easy answer to that because you can, of course, record everything that is going on. But what we do in that case is that we, of course, also provide the possibilities to exclude stuff from being recorded, to mask fields that should be there. Let's say personal identifying information, passwords we don't record by default. You can exclude entire processes that should not be there. You can also decide on when to record. For example, if somebody actually does, let's assume he does an e-trade, then you have to record what he's doing. But if he's not doing such a trade, you're not even allowed to do so. So we can very easily react on things that are happening within the session to decide on what to record and when to record. Our customers can configure on how this is supposed to work. So there are many things that you can do to actually protect privacy. So this is one part of the answer, that in between not recording anything and recording everything, there's a big range in between, and depending on the use case and the regulations, we of course deal with that. And then there's also retention in that sense that depending on what data it is, you will not keep it for eternities. If it's for customer complaint resolution, customers, if they have a problem, they typically don't call 7 days later, they call tomorrow or today. So if it's just for that case, you'll just delete that data after 2 days. But right. This is just one cluster. And there's another part to the answer where I always say, actually, we're the best thing that can happen for privacy. And that may sound a little bit strange, but you just have to be aware that what is going on today is that data is stored anyway in many, many different systems. And we've been talking about compliance. Now think about all these backend systems that are recorded, all these logs that are recorded. If a user comes and asks you, show me what you have about me, how do you do that? You're not able to do so. If he's not your customer anymore and he asks you, can you please remove all the data that you have from myself? You won't be able to do so. It's simply impossible because you just cannot tear that stuff apart. But if you switch and record what happens on the front end, we are user and session-centric by nature. So it's a super transparent process. And transparency is one of the most important things for privacy, that you can actually, we can show the user what we have about him, and we can delete it if needed. And we have a proper retention. And if it's gone, then the session data is gone. So this is kind of, you see, the entire cluster about privacy. And as you say, it's probably not the 80 kilo or the 80 ton, it's the 800 ton gorilla in the room. It's always one of the main questions, of course, but there is many things to the topics. And I think it's an illusion to believe that without session replay, the data is not retained anyway, but in a way that is way more complex to deal with.
And I think just for anybody in the United States who's listening, you mentioned a lot about, I want you to remove the data that you have about me. This is all as a result of the GDPR rules, right? Which is a European rule about data storage, privacy, right? So Europe, everyone out there is so much more ahead of us in terms of privacy. And there's all these rules. So the nice thing to understand is this tool, this replay component, was built in that environment where all this privacy and compliance has to exist. So as opposed to, let's say, if it was built over here in the United States, where we don't really necessarily think about those day to day, that's built into the tool from the ground up, I imagine, because you all knew this was coming. So there's no way you're going to be out of compliance with it. So.
Cool. Hey, Ryan, so I listened to this conversation and I kept it a little quiet because I thought it was fascinating to learn more about privacy, because as you said, Brian, it's nothing that is on our day-to-day radar. Now, one of the interesting things that you guys mentioned, it's important, especially for the compliance use case, to capture potentially every single user if you need to prove something. So what does this mean in terms of data volume? What does this mean in terms of scalability of this solution? Because obviously it's the thing that we've always claimed at Dynatrace, and we've always delivered on, is the capability to monitor 100% of your end users and 100% of your transactions. Is this also possible with Visual Replay, assuming that there might be really a lot of data?
Yeah, that's definitely what we provide, is a 100% recording, because as you say, otherwise, also even for the user complaint resolution use case, if then the user calls and you just do a sampling and you happen to not have the one that is actually calling in, then it's pretty hard to help him. And so we definitely thrive for a 100% recording, and we're also able to do so. The good news about the approach that I just described with the DOM changes is that we work differentially. So we are just recording and capturing the changes that happen. And of course, also all the events like clicks and moves, but that's not expensive, let's say expensive data or heavy data. And prior to sending that back, we also bulk it together such that we don't create an awful lot of requests on your network. And because it's text-based data, we compress it pretty well, which reduces, again, bandwidth, which reduces, again, also the load on servers, and, of course, also the storage requirements. And let's say with all these measures together, yes, we're capable of recording 100%, and we will create a decent amount of storage, obviously, if you record millions and millions of sessions, but it's not that much that you would expect.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Now, you have a lot of data, and obviously there's this use case we talked about, but I'm sure with that amount of data and that granular data, there's a lot of cool, maybe analytics use cases that you can additionally do. I think you mentioned some of them earlier, right? Helping development teams to figure out why are people dropping out at certain points. And you mentioned the figuring out, hey, there might be, it looks like a button, but it's not a button, and people clicking on it. Is there something that can also be done, let's say, more proactively instead of doing the ad hoc analysis of a complaining user? Is this also possible with the data?
Yes, it definitely is. I mean, and that's also what we want to do. We are not there right now, but that's the exact direction where we're heading. One paradigm that Dynatrace has always had is we do not just provide reports. We actually want to have recommendations. We want to have actionable intelligence. So we want to tell people what they need to do to fix the problems they have. We don't just want to tell them that they have one. And the exact same idea we also are going for when it comes to user experience analytics. So we have the data to not only tell that you have a conversion problem or actually it doesn't work or this form doesn't work, but we actually have the data to tell them what form field should they change, how to make it work better. And that is what we are currently working on. And that is what we want to provide, is this kind of recommendation intelligence to automatically inform you in case you have an issue and tell you how you can change that issue to increase, let's say, conversion, to increase happiness of your user, to increase loyalty, to decrease churn, to decrease struggle. These are all the things that this data, it contains it all, because we literally have all the information about what users have been done, and we also have it in structured form and not just as a visual reproduction.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, it falls exactly into the line what we have been doing at Dynatrace for a while, right? I mean, if you look at a RAM session right now, a user or a visit, you can then see what are the top findings and how to optimize the page load. We also do the same thing now on the server side with top findings on the pure paths. So this falls perfect in the line, because we cannot expect everyone out there to be an expert in analyzing all the data by hand. Nor do we have the bandwidth. Neither has the bandwidth. So let's use the machines to do the work for us and digging through the data, obviously optimized with the analytics and the algorithms that you guys put in place. That's pretty cool.
What I'm thinking, Andy?
What do you think?
Simon, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I hope you don't mind. It's probably the answer is probably no, but this always comes back to going back to my old load testing days. I'm wondering if there would be a way to somehow bulk export the sessions and turn those actions into some sort of playable script, not necessarily for that user with that user data. But one of the pain points in modeling any kind of workload in a load test is putting together those scripts, trying to figure out a realistic workload. I'm just musing aloud whether or not any of that information in there would be something that could be manipulated and converted into some sort of a script. I don't know. I'll have to take a look at, I guess, once we start seeing it, what it outputs. But that's always
actually, maybe to not put Simon on the spot, but to interject myself here into this discussion. We actually have already load testing partners and testing partners of Dynatrace working on that. So
really
leveraging the RAM API. So they're working with the Linz team, but I'm sure they will also soon reach out to you, Simon, to see what additional they can benefit from your data. But there's just been. We have every single user and every single click, yeah?
They already have. So, and it's interesting that you mention it, because it's a use case that even in the old Qumran times we were, let's say, confronted with it. And of course, yes, we have all the data that you could do Selenium-based or whatever tests to then run it in a synthetic environment, again, record what is happening. And that's definitely something that will add some of the data that we have to enable this functionality as well.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. So Simon or Brian, any other thoughts? Anything else that we missed that we need to make sure that the people out there understand about Visual Replay?
I've got nothing on my end. Simon, is there anything, you have the mic now, is there anything you would like to get out there? Even if it's just what you're going to do this weekend.
Or some boring stuff about Barcelona weather, which is actually pretty bad.
There's nothing boring about Barcelona. Are you kidding me? I love Barcelona.
Yeah, it's fantastic location. Well, not really. I think the only thing maybe as a last comment is that many times when I talk to people, they often try to solve problems by adding more logs and adding more and more information. And we often forget as humans how powerful analytical engines our eyes are. If we look at things, we immediately spot patterns, stuff that happens. It's so easy to use. And so just if you're dealing with problems, if you're dealing with usability issues, if you're dealing with, whatever situation where you think, it would be great to have a bit more information, just don't forget about Session Replay and add it to the stack, and you'll be amazed how much you can do with it.
Right.
Cool. Brian, is it time that I summarize?
It's time for you to summon the summarator.
Let's do it.
Perfect. All right. So, Simon, this is what we do at the end of the show. I always try to sound smart by summarizing the lessons learned. So I think what I've learned, first of all, Simon, not only are you very energetic on stage and also very energetic on the dance floor, but you also obviously love the technology that you have been, helping to drive forward over the last couple of years. Thanks for the insights on visual replay and session replay, as we call it. I learned about that it's actually not a video we record on the device. It's really technically the differences in the DOM as a user navigates and interacts with the site, which keeps obviously the volume down on data we need to collect, but still gives us all the context that we need. Now, there's a lot of great use cases, whether it's the classical user complaint resolution, helping our business people, our business analysts, our developers to figure out where people are struggling with their websites. A big use case is obviously compliance. We should not be fearing any data compliance or privacy issues because the product has been built, manufactured, and optimized in Europe, where we get these new regulations. So privacy concerns have been addressed right from the start. And there's a lot of cool things additionally we will be able to do, and we will see, like automated recommendations. So not everybody has to be an expert in analyzing all the data, but Dynatrace will automatically provide recommendations on how to improve the user experience, how to improve conversion rate, and your user experience overall. So thanks a lot, Simon. I know that there is an early access program going on. I think by the time that this podcast airs, we may even get close to the beta phase, but in any case, people can go to the Dynatrace website, search for Visual Replay, and either sign up for the early access program or looking at the beta program. And also what you mentioned, Barcelona, even though the weather is not perfect right now, but I'm sure it will be at the end of May when we are going to host our European Perform conference. So for anyone who wants to see Simon in action, who wants to see Visual Replay and learn anything about Dynatrace, check out perform.dynatrace.com and then click on the European Perform link, and you can join us there for, I think it's 2 days or so of Perform conference, including a training day. And that's all from my side. Pretty cool. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Andy. Once again, you did an awesome job summarizing. I don't have any more from a technical point of view to add there, except that I'm just waiting to get my hands on it. And I want to say to Simon and anybody else who's heading over or in Barcelona, I would highly recommend going to, I'm gonna mess up the name here, La Anxoveta restaurant. It's Catalonian, so I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's Anxoveta. It's a small little restaurant on Carrer de Saint-Dominic and Pereire Seref. I can't pronounce these things very well. Anyway, it's awesome. It's this guy who used to, I forget what he used to do, and we did one of those food tours of Catalan, and it was just awesome because it was these really great places. They got great bombas. They have a great tomato bread. The food is wonderful. The wine is wonderful. It's a small little place, but get over there if you can. I don't know if you've been there, Simon. I think it's in the Gracia neighborhood. It's just quite good. That's what my summarizing will be, since we're talking about Barcelona. And Replay, it's awesome. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I know this isn't the first Replay tool out there, but knowing what we've been seeing coming out of you guys and knowing how we do things here at Dynatrace, I think it's going to be quite amazing. And the fact that it's going to be natively tied into everything else that we do is just going to make that replay experience so much better than just having replay on its own. So I hope everyone's looking forward to it as much as I am, and we'll have some reports soon. Thank you, Simon. Any last words from you?
Well, if you're looking for a restaurant in Barcelona, you can also just call me.
Yes.
I'll be happy to help out. Yeah, and thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you.